I'm a trainer in the financial market. I'm training financial advisors and a lot of wealth managers. So sometimes they are looking for new ideas. So this morning I'm going to present to you actually a new idea. And that's why I talk about retire before retirement. So let's look at my presentation. There's actually three parts. The first part of the presentation is the case. What is the current case about a certain retirement issue? And then secondly, the how. The strategy to implement the retire before retirement. And thirdly, the benefits. So those are the three areas that I'm going to cover. And I hope I'm going to make it in 15 minutes. So let's see. First of all, the case. What is the current case? I think the current case is we tend to retire at the age of 65. I'm just saying, I'm just using an example because it could be 70, it could be later. Fact of the matter is, we tend to do something on retirement, generally speaking. You relax a bit, you down tools, but what you plan to do as well, you actually mature all your tax incentivized investments. Otherwise you mature everything and then you go on to full retirement. The operative word there is tax incentivized investments. What do we mean by tax incentivized investments? It means investments that you made and the taxman paid you something back. Because you can also have some other investments. You can have investments that is deposit at the bank, etc. But you don't get a tax deduction for that. You spend money in groceries, but the receiver revenue says, I'm not going to give you any deductions. But if you spend on tax incentivized investments, like a pension fund, or like a retirement annuity fund, they said, okay, you can deduct that expense. So that's the beauty about that. So there's an opportunity here. So as I said earlier, you tend to retire from everything there. But there's another case, a new case. You're not lying down, you're still working. Okay? And now there's another one. There's a bit of great curiosity here, and there's an arrow coming through and says, you can retire at another level. Retire, you mature a portion of your investments, actually. Not the full amount, not everything. And that's actually a wealth creation strategy, actually. So let's see. So you can retire actually 55. There's a specific reason why 55. Because there's a certain tax incentivized product that allow you to retire at 55. Which I think, and I found, and I've listened, financial advisors generally say, no, keep your retirement annuity fund until you retire. But there's a case to be made to retire, but early on your retirement annuity fund. So let's see, how do you do that? So how do you retire earlier? Here is the strategy. Number one, you have your timeline again, and we're going to focus now on 55. But before 55, we suggest you contribute to your investment RA funds. So what is the investment RA fund? The retirement annuity fund. You have two types actually. You have a insurance RA fund, which is a bit of an old school. Your insurance RA fund is a contract, there are penalties, there's a lot of things involved with that. But then you have an investment RA fund, which is not a contract. You can go on maternity leave and you don't contribute, no penalties. You come back, you contribute. You change jobs, you still have your RA fund. Stays at the same place. Or you can move it around between different product providers. So what we're saying is for this strategy, start off and invest prior to 55 in investment RA funds. So in other words, in that period, you focus on pumping up your RA funds. If you are a corporate employee, you work for Standard Bank for instance, then the suggestion is put the minimum of your amount according to the contract and the laws of your employer inside the employer's fund, and put the maximum inside your RA fund because you want to retire at 55. So any bonuses, anything extra you have, you invest inside an RA fund. This release funds to retire 55. Remember, you're not downing tools. you retire on another level, which you can actually use to your advantage. If you're self-employed, prior to 55, you continue to use, because RAs were actually invented for people that are not having a full employment and having a benefit of a pension fund where you're getting the tax deduction. So RAs was used for that. But RAs could be a very important addition to your financial plan. So now you build up your credit. They call it a RA fund credit. You build up your credit at 55. Now's the time to retire from the fund. How do you do that? First of all, you say you can take a lump sum. Up to 1/3 you can take a lump sum. 500,000 rand is currently tax-free. So if you have a 1.5 million retirement annuity fund, you can draw 500,000 rand tax-free, and you've got tax deductions for that up front. Now here's the opportunity. What do you do now? You have to buy, according to the law, a living annuity with up to 2/3. So now you have to draw an income from that, but we will show you later on what you do with that. So first of all, what do you do with that lump sum? You invest it back into a new RA. Because now this is where you have got now access to capital, 500,000 there, that if you didn't use it, and you use it only in 65, you missed the opportunity here. Remember, you can do this strategy after 55 anytime. You can even do this strategy on full retirement as well. But let's focus now on this one here. So you've got 500,000 in the current regime. If you have 1.5 million in your RA fund, which you can draw tax-free, and it will change hopefully into the future. So you invest it back into a new RA. What happens now? Another round of additional tax kickbacks, which you couldn't get before the time. If you stayed in your old way of thinking, am I right? Just retire everything in the end. So now you can retire early, you invest in the new RA, new rounds of tax kickbacks. What do you do with that? You reinvest them back into your new RA fund, actually. If you don't do that, it's like a zero-sum game. You just move your money from one investment product to another investment product. You understand? So you have to reinvest them back to get the benefit. And then secondly, as I said, with your living annuity, now you've retired, you have to draw a pension on a living annuity. There's also a life annuity, but we suggest a living annuity. Living annuity, what does it mean? It can outlive you if you're lucky, okay? Life annuity, it dies with you, generally speaking, for life. So you have two choices on retirement. Actually, you can buy a living annuity or a life annuity with tax incentivized investments. So now you have to draw a minimum of 2.5% income. That's the current legislation. Suggesting again, otherwise there are leakages on your whole procedure. You have to invest that back as well. Okay, so this is the story on how. Now, what are the benefits? We showed you already the tax kickbacks. I want to talk about the tax kickbacks first. So, what are the benefits of this strategy actually? Number one.
Sorry, Ankie, you're assuming now that even though I'm retiring from my RAs, I'm actually continuing to work.
You continue to work.
You continue to work until age 65.
If you want to work until age 65.
So you're actually literally just retiring on paper, you're not retiring yet.
Yes, exactly. It's a retirement from your investment. But not a retirement from your employment. Retire before retirement. Okay. So it's a great way of, but remember there are certain bells and whistles here, certain assumptions here. Number one, this is great for you having a tight budget. Remember, you can invest up to 27.5% of your taxable income in an RA, or in a pension fund, or in a provident fund together as a group of tax incentivized investments. But this is nice if you have a tight budget, because suddenly you're having school, children, and other expenses. You can't manage making provision for retirement, and now you've got this extra 500,000 rand available. And you can do up to 27.5%, you can actually contribute up to 27.5% of the taxable income. So that's the assumption of this approach. But there's no problem, and that's a topic of another day, there's no problem to make more investment than 27.5% into your RA funds. But that's another topic on this day. We can talk about it maybe at another speaker school meeting. But number one, you have to have scope, you have a tight budget, suddenly you're getting extra tax kickbacks, you invest that into your new RA. And there's no rule that you must have one RA, you can have many RAs. return on investments. Okay, so here we go. So what is that? This is an example. I mean, there could be the super rich also struggle to balance their budget. You get 45 Rand back for every 100 Rand you invest actually if you're in a 45% margin in the tax bracket. Then it continue. You can use whatever tax bracket you are in. If you're in 41%, you get 41 Rand back for every 100 Rand that you put in. And then you get 39 Rand back. I didn't use all of the tax bracket you get. But for every tax bracket that you are in, you're getting tax kickbacks for that. Remember if you're super rich, your investments into this one is capped at 350,000 Rand currently. Then second one is a larger exposure to equity and share investments. What do I mean by that? Why larger exposure? Because there's a certain legislation. When you're in the retirement annuity fund versus a living annuity fund, there are different regulations according to your exposure to equity. Let's take that for instance. Your RA funds are capped at 75% equity. There is a regulation 28 of the pension fund. They cap you at 75%. You're not allowed to have more than 75% into equities actually. But now you move into living annuity space. It's a different legislation space, different rules because you're not in the RA space anymore, you're now in the living annuity space. In the living annuity space, you can pump it up to 100%. No regulation 28 is applicable there. So now the question is, why do I focus so much on equities? Because equity is supposed to be the asset class that outperforms the other asset classes. So if you want to increase your equity exposure, you're still 55, you're still relatively young, remember with the advances in medical, you need to have the exposure to equity more, especially you're still working, am I right? So now you can pump up to 100% equity. So your investment can actually work harder. And while you're employed and you're able to take actually risks. Just want to say something about equity, and it's a volatile asset class. There's a quote that someone once said, how you behave is far more important than how your investments behave. Your reaction to volatility is more a risk than the risk of equity. Yeah. So sometimes equity could be in your favor. And I will show you later on a way that you can take out the sting out of equity. Because actually the next point actually says it. The longer you're exposed to equity, the longer you negate the impact of volatility. Yeah. You see, so we talk a lot about diversification on investment, but nobody talks about diversification over time. Diversification over time means you are longer in the asset class. The longer you are in the asset class, the less you are affected by the volatility when you exit. But we've got a different mindset. You can make volatility actually your friend in investments. But that's another topic for another day. How to actually exploit uncertainties from other people in the investment world actually. So, you start earlier. So you improve your time in the market. This is a well-known financial company that has this quote. It's time in the market, not time in the market. In other words, have more time in the asset class, and then you will get the benefit from that asset class. And you can also reduce, in other words, you reduce the impact of volatility by being longer in the asset class. Then, longevity risk is reduced with, remember the first 2 points, with longer and larger equity exposure. What do you mean by longevity? You live too long. Okay. And your investments are not enough. So here we go. Medical advances says you add 1 year to your life for every 4 years past. So every 4 years until your expected death, they add 1 year to your life because of improvement in medical advances actually. So by being in equity can help you to reduce that risk because they work a bit harder and they take out the sting out of volatility if you long-term investor. Let's take the example here. If you are 50 years old today, to get this point across, 50 years old today, Your current life expectancy is 80 years, so you have another 30 years to live. So you've got 30 years to live. Let's take that 4 years. How many 4 years blocks are there? There are actually 7.5 blocks. It means, what does it mean actually? You have to add another 7.5 years to your expected life expectancy. So when you're 50, when you're 55, you need to change the mindset to say, I should not be exposed to shares. This is old school thinking. You have to have quite a strategy where you also have equity exposure at the same time. So equity can actually help you there to take you on this journey until retirement actually. Now, let's move on to the next round of benefits. We're moving towards the end of that. There is no interference. If you convert your RAs, RA funds, into living annuities, there is no interference in your estate plan. What do I mean by that? It means the beneficiaries that you nominate on the product will go to those beneficiaries. But if you're in an RA fund, not necessarily, because there's a different legislation gap there, which is your trustees of the fund decide who will get what when you die before the time. So on death, living annuity proceeds go straight to your beneficiaries. But that's not always the case with RA funds. Because there is a section 37C of the Pension Fund Act. Remember, this is a very important section because this section says the trustees will decide who get what, and they focus on one thing. They focus on your dependents and not on your beneficiaries. Well, your dependents, ex-spouse, children. You nominate the beneficiary, said, sorry Floris, we're going to look at the dependents and we're going to give the money to the dependents. So there's one advantage by converting early into a living annuity, then that type of regulation is not then applicable because in a different space. They may override your nominations, the trustees. More flexibility in your financial plan because you retire earlier, you've got access to money earlier. More use for the earlier lump sum. Here's a beautiful one, for instance. You can save interest by paying off debt. There's now a total different strategy, something different, but it relates back to the above strategy. Now, you can invest the debt repayment amount into new RA. So you settle your debt and invest into a new RA. And here's a very important one. If debt was still an overhang from your children's education, you can say, well, now I'm paying back, I pay off my debt. So you can actually use the RA to fund your children's education and you're getting tax deductions for that. Which some people never thought about. So you can use your RA in a different way than just saying for retirement. So you use that 500,000 rand and you put your children to university or you pay off the debt that you incurred while they a few years earlier at university or any education institution actually. And then you can go overseas earlier than planned. Okay. Taste a bit of your time at 55 while your health is still okay. Because it's no use, you have longevity, and you don't have the quality of that.
You can't walk up the steps onto the ship.
So your living annuities anyhow going to be work harder. So your living annuities anyhow going to work harder for you while you've got larger equity exposure. The money works harder for you in the background. So it's no good to be alive, but you can't enjoy it. Okay, this is the end of my story.
Taxi.
Sorry, ladies and gentlemen.
Thanks very much. Thank you so much.